please. Thank you.
Pointer. Use my mic. It's all on, Okay. Stay your team.
Testicles.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Selling from Lang Tengah Turtle Watch, and it's my honor to be here with three awesome people, and they represent different organizations in Malaysia doing marine conservation work and also sustainable tourism that they're trying to strive for. So I don't have to introduce them. So what I want to do is let them introduce themselves and what they do at where they are. And we have the first one from... It's not working. Yeah, so we have Tanya, who's going to tell us more about their work at Tengah Island.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So TIC is a registered non-profit organization based in Mersing, Johor. Our focus is on the conservation of the natural environment through practical and scientific projects, and also through community involvement and awareness and the promotion of responsible and sustainable tourism practices. So our project originally has its roots actually back in 2014 when dive staff at the resort Batu Batu noticed that sea turtle nests on the island were being poached. So they started the island's first hatchery in collaboration with Department of Fisheries, and the projects grew from there. So as scientists joined the team over the years and the work expanded to cover more projects and more locations, we realized that to do what we wanted to do, we were outgrowing the resort. So in 2019, we registered as an independent NGO. And since then, our projects have expanded to now cover several different islands where we carry out reef and seagrass conservation, monitoring and mapping, beach and underwater cleanups, and also coral rehab. In addition to that, our team is collecting baseline monitoring data for green and hawksbill sea turtles across Johor. And our outreach program works with schools, local communities, tourists and tourism operators and resorts as well. That's it.
Thanks, Tanya. So what about you, Jit? What do you do? And do you want to introduce more about your organization?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jit Vendra, the marine biologist at Tropical Research and Conservation Center. So I'm representing TRAC here today in Dive Expo. We are based at Pom Pom Island, Semporna. So the furthest point within Malaysia from KL is Semporna. And at Pom Pom Island, we are a marine research and conservation center, meaning that we conduct marine studies, research studies, and conservation activities. So these images is basically from Pom Pom Island. We are based and funded by volunteers from around the world and also nationally. We do projects. When we talk about marine conservation, we do underwater cleanups, collect discarded fishing lines, underwater cleanups, marine debris for this. And then we also have a research program doing turtle facial ID. So we do have a huge population of marine turtles, mainly green turtles, and we ID them into our database. So all of this is our research, and for conservation, we also do beach cleanups, community engagement, and that's pretty much it for us.
Yeah, thanks, Jit. When was TRAC set up?
TRAC started at Pom Pom Island in 2011. Okay, founded by the late Steve Oakley. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2016, and now TRAC is brought forward by the next new generation. Okay.
Right. Thanks, Jit. And so we have one from Borneo, and Tengah Island Conservation is actually based in Johor. So we're going to go to Terengganu, Perhentian Island with Hidayah.
Okay, hi, hello everyone. Thank you for having me, and then thank you for listening. So my name is Hidayah, so the project manager for Perhentian Marine Research Station. So we are based in Perhentian Islands, Terengganu. So basically, for PMRS, it was been established in 2017 by the social enterprise. So it's a tourism company called 𝐏𝐀𝐍𝐄𝐋, and then we've been the aims of the project on the islands is basically to oversee the assessment, oversee the health of the ecosystems over there, including reef and also seagrass, and then work together with the stakeholders around the islands so that the marine resources of Perhentian Islands can be sustainably managed. Yeah, so that is the introduction a little bit. And then we work also with the volunteering programs, and then especially closely with the Marine Park Department, so the like government agency, just to see how things can be managed locally, and then can be adapt to suit the stakeholders on the islands.
Thanks, Hidayah. So yeah, so we're talking about all of them doing conservation work, and not just turtles, but corals, educational outreach, and a few aspects. So I would like to know more from Tanya. So how do you find it challenging to actually balance between conservation and tourism? You know how sometimes tourism has impacts, right? And on conservation, like the marine resources. So how do you go about that, and what are the challenges that you face?
So TIC actually we work quite closely with the tourism industry, both in terms of working with tourists and the tourism operators and resorts themselves. In terms of us working with Batu Batu, we've actually been really lucky because they are quite committed on their sustainability journey. So recognizing that they're not perfect and there's still a lot of work to do, they want to minimize their impacts and to do the right thing, you know. But it's not always so simple. So we work with lots of different operators and lots of different resorts. For many of them, the barriers are economic. So it's not always financially easy to become more sustainable, particularly after the pandemic. So I think it's been a lot harder for tourism operators, resorts, different tourism businesses to kind of invest in sustainability when they're still struggling to survive and to recover from that time. So that's been a new challenge for us, kind of restarting those conversations and getting people engaged again in that when they've just been in survival mode, just trying to keep their businesses running. For us, we try to take like a holistic approach and look at all aspects of the business, and we try to understand them as a business player. So sustainability, we always talk about the environment, but it actually has different pillars, and the environment's just one of them. So the economics, so being financially sustainable is part of it, investing in the people that work for the tourism organization, protecting the local communities, respecting local cultures are all part of it as well. So we come at it from an angle where we're also trying to propose solutions that work for their tourism operation, that's not going to harm their business, it's going to benefit them and the environment and support the local communities, you know, all in one shot.
So I know that you guys are actually doing like a waste management project, and I would see that as part of like a sustainable tourism. Do you find it difficult to actually promote that among the tourism stakeholders there?
So waste is obviously a huge problem on islands, and it's really hard to manage because there's no kind of municipal infrastructure in place. A big focus is on getting all your materials, everything you need to the island. That's hard enough. So getting rid of it at the end is really difficult. So most resorts, most operations actually, they just burn or dump the solid waste, and the sewage treatment. We've seen lots of different systems on the island, ranging from outright dumping into culverts in the ground to sort of septic tanks and old systems that were fit for purpose maybe years ago, but now are overcapacity and are leaking out. So a lot of the operators that we connect with, they they're interested in doing better for waste management, and they want the solutions, you know. So a lot of them, they just don't have the kind of maybe the time or the bandwidth to search for those solutions, to find things that work. Maybe they've tried different things in terms of sustainability or waste management over the years and they failed, and so they've kind of lost faith in it. So most people are really open to have the conversation with us, but they want to see solutions. They're like, yeah, okay, so what are you going to do? You know, what can you suggest? What works? So as well as doing the kind of baseline studies on what's happening with the waste on the islands, we also are coming with pilot solutions for the communities and the tourism operators to see what works.
Can you share more about the pilot operation between the local communities and stakeholders? So what is the end goal and how far do you think that you can achieve that? Like how soon?
It's a long process also. Obviously we reach a certain point where we can do things on the ground and with the tourism operations, and then we also need government involvement for certain things, especially with the wastewater. That's a pretty big step. So it obviously depends a lot on kind of local authority commitment and time and priorities to be able to support and move things along. For us, on one of the islands we're working, the solid waste management is going really, really well. So we're at a point where a lot of the waste that was previously being burnt or dumped is now being separated and recycled. And a large proportion of the food waste from the resorts, which is huge, is being composted, and we've started a community garden on the island too. And we've also got community members from the island who are employed and working on the project also. So that on that side, you know, it's pretty promising and definitely scalable to other islands.
So besides waste management with all the tourism stakeholders, do you actually engage more in other aspects as well, like maybe like conservation activities or any other research activities that you guys do?
Yeah, so I think like many NGOs, we do educational talks and activities. We have a conservation center which guests can visit. They can participate directly in beach cleanups, and also we have a turtle hatchery. So with the turtle hatchery and hatchling releases, we kind of aim to promote turtle tourism best practice in a way and highlight how it should be done ethically. So our hatchlings are released as soon as they hatch. We don't obviously allow touching or petting or flash photography or anything, and we kind of emphasize the fact that the turtles are not there for the tourists, but it's the other way around. And one of the interesting things as well is obviously the revenues that can be generated from tourism. So there's one aspect which is minimizing the negative impacts of tourism, and then there's the potential for tourism to actually have a positive impact on the destination. So tourists might buy merchandise or donate or adopt a nest, but we've also trialed this year with Batu Batu Resort like an opt-out donation, which is on their bill, and there's a 70% uptake rate for it so far. So because the tourists can see the work that we're doing and they see the impacts on the local environment, they're quite happy to kind of give to the organization and continue the work.
That sounds awesome. I hope that we'll see something happening with all the tourism stakeholders, especially with the waste management that you guys are doing now. So what about you, Jit? Like I know TRAC actually does a lot of in-water research and surveys, and at the same time, they have very active volunteering programs where people can join, not just learn about conservation activities, what do marine biologists do, but it's also a very good way to promote awareness and by actually engaging people. But do you face any challenges to balance between, you know, like you want to have all these tourism activities with like marine resources, but at the same time, you don't want to have negative impacts?
Yeah, so I guess to be honest, it can be very easy to be frustrated with tourists, especially when they're not aware, trampling on coral reefs, dumping their trash on an island, right? But I think honestly also, no one does this maliciously. No one crashes on the corals on purpose. It either they really suck out their buoyancy or they don't have the awareness. And I guess at some point in time, we also did not have that awareness. Okay, so it's all about sharing and normalizing discussions like this, having the forums like that. And I think it's not just the duty of NGOs and conservation places to preach this, but every resort also holds that responsibility to talk about conservation, because as Tanya spoke about sustainability, economic sustainability, for your resort to be sustainable, you got to also keep your stock, your capital stock intact. Okay, it shouldn't be diminishing. So that is one of the challenge, understanding tourists where they come from, and also to overcome that, speak more about it, also win hearts and minds with this aspect. And then the second challenge will be marine debris. Okay, also again, Tanya spoke a lot about poor waste management in depth, about how it's lacking in a lot of islands here in Malaysia. Similarly, even worse in Semporna. Okay, if you don't have a dustbin or you don't have a system to dispose your waste, the only thing you can do is dump it out of your wherever you're sitting, right? So the trash is going to be coming still in every single day. We can spend time collecting, doing beach cleanups, collecting, picking up these marine debris, but knowing the fact that the very next tide, the trash is going to come back, it's very demotivating. So it feels like insanity, picking up again and again, dumping it in a place where, who knows, it might just be dumped back in the ocean, right? So I guess the only benefit with doing beach cleans in that sense, one of it, in my opinion, is the people who join the beach cleanup, they think twice before using the single-use plastic or before just dumping it when we have the privilege to dump it somewhere in a proper disposal system. So yeah, those are the two challenges we face that I can talk about briefly. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jit. But what about any challenges working with any of the tourism stakeholders over there? And
in terms of tourism stakeholders, I think generally people are quite receptive. It's just a matter of how we convey the message. And we also need to ensure that they profit from doing something like that. Unfortunately, it's basically if you don't contribute to, let's say, a beach clean, a community beach clean between the resorts, as soon as your tourists walk out of your resort range, they will see the trash, right? So it's a matter of conveying and selling it to them. So, so far it's been quite receptive, and the challenge is just bridging that ego that people have with each other sometimes.
Right, thanks, Jit. And so, Hidayah, you're at Perhentian, and I know, unlike the other two islands, Perhentian has a lot more tourists and perhaps stakeholders that you have to work with. Would you like to share more about, how do you engage with all these tourism stakeholders to, do sustainable tourism and while conserving marine resources?
Okay, so for Perhentian, as you mentioned, is a very popular tourism islands. And then the socio-economics of the island is that the community itself involved directly to become tourism player, snorkel operators, dive operators, and so on. So like the way we're doing is build up a relationship. So it's not an easy, and then it takes such a long time. So I've been in Perhentian for 5 years now. And then, so like along those 5 years, I really can see the changes, how acceptive they are towards what we are doing. So like the relations that we have now is based on the trust. So I respect their livelihood, the way they earn their money and then sustain their families, and then they also kind of like accepting why we are doing all those conservations, and then try to implementing rules and regulations of the marine park so that the resources can be sustained longer. And then in a way, for PMRS itself, that's why we started our research activities, collecting the data so that we have all those reliable data set. Because when we talk to the stakeholders, they kind of like, oh, so this is what's happening on the islands. And then for the community, so we live with the communities of Perhentian. So we live in the village of Perhentian Islands, and then we started to build up the engagement and then empowerment program for the local kids, so that those are basically now joining my team. So we have 18 of the local youngsters, like young adults, who've been in Perhentian since they were born there, and then live up onto the islands, and then now they're joining us to do assessment, surveying, and then so this year we are able to establish rapid response teams where these young adults of Perhentian Islands are the ones who are collecting ghost nets from the reef ecosystem. So basically, they really can see what is happening. And then for tourism player, in a way, for dive shops, is very receptive in Perhentian, so they kind of like interested knowing that they also can contribute. It's not easy to get them recognizing our work, especially we try to push for eco diving practices, and then trying to like limiting, how do I say, so like limiting the assessments of the divers. So maybe a certain dive sites can be assessed only by advanced diver, so that is can be reducing the stress to the ecosystem. So that is how we kind of like building up the relationship. It takes some time to get the recognitions, to get like the names out there for PMRS to be able assisting and then assessing the situations in Perhentian, but it's happening in a way. We are able to have support from the dive shops, and the local community kind of like understand why we are always saying don't touch the corals, don't step on the corals, and then don't feed the fish. So they kind of understand, so this is your work of doing conservation on the islands. And having the local Anak Pulau is a local program for the kids. So they've been certified as the divers, and then they've been trained to be able to join the conservation project. So it's kind of like they also benefiting from us as a conservation station, and then we are also benefiting in a way promoting sustainable management of the islands, and then also eco practices of the islands. So the challenges is in a way to getting them understand and then involving themselves with our activities.
Right, that's really interesting because before I joined Lang Tengah Turtle Watch, I was in Perhentian as well, and I was part of the team who was teaching the kids then, and they were like 5, 6, 7 years old, and now they are what, 17, 18, and they are part of this group called Anak Pulau, and they are doing a good job in trying to train them to actually, take that ownership, stewardship to look after the island. And I think, do you think this is like something that's going to be ongoing? Like, so you continue getting more and more. How many Anak Pulau do you have in the group now?
So I have 18 for now. So everyone has been trained from open water, and then next week some of them are doing rescue diver. So 18, and then some of the stakeholders also participate as a rapid response team. So up to 23 people so far registered, and then if we have activities, especially reporting coming from stakeholders for GhostNet, so this team will be mobilized to get them removed from the reef.
Right. So, when we talk about sustainable tourism, then it's quite a common term to hear about carrying capacity. So, do you all face the same issues of like there are actually more and more tourists, or like when you have volunteers as well, do you like limit the number of people who come and help at one time? Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so for Pom Pom Island, it's still not that famous compared to Mabul in the area or Sipadan. Normally, Pom Pom is a lesser known island, which is a good thing because we don't want too many people. But compared to previously, before the pandemic, there were more tourists at Pom Pom Island. Now, after the pandemic, the flight tickets are still pricey, so the level of tourists is still below what it was before. And for us at Trek, at Pom Pom Island, our carrying capacity is based on how many tents we have available. So which is not that many. So it's a good thing as well because then everything goes smoothly with the projects and activities. Yeah.
What about in Tengah Island conservation? Because I know you guys actually work around many islands, and I think how do you actually ensure that? Does it have an impact like when you have too many tourists, and how do you ensure that all the operators the more people, the more money, right?
Yeah, so it's definitely an issue, particularly with kind of day trip snorkel tourism, and it's a bit of a booming industry where we are. So every year, more and more people get boats and come out to the islands because they can earn money, and the more people you get on the boat, the more money you get. So we're obviously trying to promote a model of sustainable tourism with less people and higher prices for a higher quality experience, and you still get a good yield. Again, local operators were much more receptive to those conversations before the pandemic. And so we're still building back those relationships, you know, and trying to keep the conversations going so that when the time's right for the operators, we can work on those things. It definitely has an impact on the reefs. You can see it from our reef survey data, that where there's day trip hotspots or tourism hotspots where the sewage isn't managed properly, that the health of the reef has deteriorated hugely. And you can also see where we are, there's certain islands that are not open for tourism, and the health of the reefs is some of the highest in the country. It was on the news a few weeks ago. So the data also backs it up. For us, in terms of our volunteer program is located on Pulau Tanga, and Pulau Tanga, there's 22 villas in the resort that's there, so their footprint's quite small. And for us, we also only take a small number of volunteers and interns at a time, probably between 4 and 8. And that's partly to do with the size of our accommodation, but also it's the right amount for our projects, and to make sure that the volunteers and interns that work with us can get really involved with real conservation work, that our staff have the time and the capacity to train them, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So it's the same with Perhentian. I think, yeah, the number of the tourists are increasing and a lot, and of course not including day trips. How do you deal with that? Because I know you focus more on community work, training the locals to actually take stewardship of this, but what about, like, in general, the number of tourists impacting, like, their impacts?
So for Perhentian, it's obvious the numbers increasing, and then Perhentian itself blooming started, I believe, in 2016, and it's carrying up until 2019 before pandemics, and then now it's started coming back again. So yeah, the trips, day trips packages is increasing. I think it's double because it's accessible. How accessible Perhentian it is from the mainland, and then how easy it is to get day trips and then coming back to the mainland. So like more numbers is coming up, and then how we sort things out with the day trips and the numbers of tourists in a way. Okay, so I don't, so like PMRS itself, we don't really have authorities to restrict a certain area, but so I believe that the way that the Perhentian workings now is a certain reef area has been designated for day trip package, and then we got a little bit help from the resort itself, like a certain beach has been, so we got resorts on the beach, so kind of like, it's supposed to be public beach, but because the resort is occupying those green beach, and then it somehow can be a private beach in a way. So it's also helped us to restricting a day trip package into a certain part. But we really can see the changes of that reef area where we have concentrated numbers of snorkelers, and then the reef area started to degrade this year, especially because more family days and then more tourists, like day trip, picnics, and then the numbers of trash has been dumped onto the beach also increasing. So at least in a way, we have that one area that we are able to manage, and then we are able to strategize how to reduce the numbers of trash over there, and then we work with the MDB, the City Council of Besut, so that they can concentrate more on that particular beach area that full with day trip package and then 1 day tourists, so that they are able to collect the trash from there frequently compared to, like, they do have contractors collecting 3 days a week for the waste management from the islands to the mainland. But so we requesting they to specifically focusing on that area of the beach, which is Teluk KK. I believe you know that area. So, and then they can focusing on that, and then we also engaging with the so there's small stalls over there. So basically, the plastics, the food packaging is coming from their stall. So we engaging for engaging them in a way we providing the bins. so that they can help up to sorting all those trash and plastic to bring back to the village if possible. And then if not, the city councils, the contractors will come and then pick up from there. So the numbers of perhentian tourists definitely increasing over the year. And then also the divers also increasing because of the rates and packages for dive courses is cheap compared to other islands. And so that's why a relationship with the dive shops is really important for us. And then resorts also in a way, because like if we got the dive shops relationships, in a way they're practicing more on green practices, eco practices, even though the tourist is staying somewhere else, but they are diver, so they can keep raising the awareness. And then we started to see a certain dive shops limiting the numbers of divers for that for a certain dive site. So that means only advanced divers can go to those dive sites. And then so like yeah, so that's how we're trying to work with for the tourist number on the island.
Yeah, it's really good to know that all the conservation organizations here are actually trying to do very best in terms of sustainable tourism practices. So maybe you guys have some words of like, we can't stop tourism and tourism is good for the economy, but how can the members of the public, divers, like what can they do to actually travel responsibly?
Okay, so I guess the take-home message for this panel is that you got to give and take, right? In life, you got to take and give. So if you're a diver and you just want to travel and see the beauty of the coral reef as all of these billboards or posters are displaying, usually they're not going to show you the posters of the trash or the pampers stuck on the coral reef. So there are all these images that when you go to these sites, you will see. So instead of just taking, you got to give back something. Okay, you can start as a diver. When you see an underwater piece of trash, always make it your principal, put it in your BCD or in your pocket. You can start something simple like that. I'm not asking you to go to an island and start building artificial reefs, all of you all, but in some way, okay, even at home, you can be a conservationist. Conserve resources. I think in the Klang Valley, we're having water cuts, so we can start conserving water, reject the single-use plastic. Sorry, Food Panda and Grab Food, but eat in. Do not use plastic spoons, cups, cutleries, and containers. That's what we can do. We don't have to be diving to do something. As a person, you can also do something. That will be what I got to say.
That's really a strong message, because I think a lot of time people always think like, oh, you know, I wanna do coral propagation, I wanna restore coral, I wanna save turtle eggs. So these are all actually work that requires some training and research background, but it doesn't mean that you can't contribute as well. And what Jit say, that everybody can really do their part to, you know, just a little impact, but collectively we actually contribute a lot. And what do you think, Tanya? What do you have to say?
Well, obviously, yeah, I echo everything Jeet said and you as well, Sailing. And I think it just comes down to being like a conscious, thoughtful and respectful tourist, you know? Before you go somewhere, do your homework about, you know, being respectful to the local cultures and the local communities as well as the environment, especially if you're going to a place that might have sensitive communities, sensitive habitats, and where you might come into contact with wildlife. Generally speaking, if the tourism operation is allowing you to feed or touch or pet wildlife, that's something to avoid. Echoing what Jeet said as well, be water-wise. Tourists tend to use vast amounts of water compared to the local communities, which, as well as being a scarce and often expensive resource with a big carbon footprint, then leads to wastewater. So the more water that we're using as tourists is the more water that needs to be then processed and treated to not negatively impact our reefs. That's it.
Yeah, and Hidayah, do you have anything to, you know, enlighten us?
So yeah, I will agree with them both. Everything's covered. And then for me, I will strongly say start individually, because like everyone can play their role. It's either at homes or even you guys when traveling, visiting other places, it's not necessarily to the island itself, but if you're doing terrestrial tourism, visiting the national parks and so on, it's always started individually, even though like, for example, we can say the resorts offering water bottles. If you, for individually, if you say that I will have my own water bottles and refills, always ask for the water refill instead of using the resort's water bottles. So it can reduce at least one water bottles, plastic water bottles into the trash bin. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with Hidayah. So I be more conscious of your own impact on the environment, because if you actually do the work we do, you do get frustrated picking out trash the whole time, cigarette butts, straws, and things like that. So yeah, it's great having all of you here. And for everyone out there, if you're traveling anywhere, there are actually a lot of conservation organizations wherever you are. You just have to look out for them, and you know they always have activities or things that they need help with that you can volunteer with them. And this time at midday, we have track. So track has a booth here too, and please support them. And TIC is also here for the first time at midday. So if you can drop by and just speak to them and you want to understand more about the work they do and how you can help, you can do that too. And Hidayah will be around, so just look out for her. Yeah, so I think that's all from us. And thank you so much for being here. And I hope you learned something from us.
Thank you.